Anthony Turrin writes, hey AMC Movie Talk staff, you guys are the best at what you do. Woohoo! My question is about the DC cinematic universe. Man of Steel had such a poor critic reception at 56% on Rotten Tomatoes, but strong box office numbers. Which do you think is more important to Warner Brothers, and what do you think will have a heavier impact on the success of the DC universe? Critic reviews or box office numbers? Thanks, and keep on doing what makes this show so great.
It's a great question, but they're really two separate questions that you have to look at when talking about, what's more important, the critic reviews or the box office? Well, it depends on more important to what. If you're talking about more important towards moving forward, I don't think the studios care what the critics said about the previous thing. What the critics are what the studios are more concerned about when addressing the question, should we move forward in this franchise? The two questions they asked is, how did the fans receive it? And how did it do at the box office? Those are the two main questions. Because if it does modestly well at the box office, but the fans loved it, there's potential. If the fans were okay on it, but it made huge box office, then there's potential. If the fans didn't like it and it didn't do well at the box office, doesn't matter if every critic in the world called it the best film of all time, they're not going to make a sequel, right? So, but when talking about how well will a sequel do, well then the critics do come into it. I told this story before, but one of the studio reps once talked to me and said, there's basically a 10% swing. If the critic, let's say a movie is going to, for argument's sake, if a movie just by itself is going to make $100 million, if the critics all hate it, it'll probably make 90. If the critics all love it, it'll probably make 110. And don't think for a second that $20 million difference doesn't make a difference to the studios. They want that entirely. So when talking about a movie that they've made and they're going to put out, they completely care about the critics. When talking about considering making a sequel or a franchise, then they don't worry about the critics at all. It all depends on the timing of the process. Dennis?
Yeah, I mean, if you're talking about just the studios, I'd say, yeah, obviously the box office numbers are number one, and what the critics say number two. My feeling is that disparity is a lot. I think box office numbers and then what the critics think right there, That's their movie business, so of course that's what they're going to care about, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And yeah, I think what they care about too is what the fans think, because critics can hate something, but the fans love it. Let's say for like Transformers, I didn't care for it, but the fans apparently was well received, and so they're going to make another one.
Schnepp?
Yeah, I mean, I don't really know what this Rotten Tomatoes thing is that you guys are talking about. What's up, Gray? So yeah, I mean, but those are the critics. And so that really had nothing to do with Man of Steel. That made so much money, even though it got a 56. I loved it. I was like, I think a lot of critics sometimes are too hard on movies, especially genre pictures. Like, you could pick a horror film and almost every critic is usually going to hate on it. So it's like, that what Rotten Tomatoes are those things. That's a good way to like see what the critics are saying. But then there's always the audience response, the audience polling when they're leaving, and ultimately it is the money. It's how much money did Superman made so much money. Of course they're going to make a sequel. So
and move forward and stuff like that. Yeah, and it's interesting. It's normally Superman is one of the rare examples. There's a myth that what the critics think and what the fans think are always completely different. Actually, it's usually pretty close. There is the odd film here and there where there's a big disparity. 56% of the critics gave Superman or Man of Steel a positive review. It's still my favorite film of the year. And the critics, or the fans obviously responded much more positively. And obviously they did, but it's one of the few examples where, but you know what, critics, there's also another myth that critics never like genre films. That's not what you weren't saying they never like genre films. But to that I say, well, look at the critic rating of The Avengers. It's huge. Look at the critic rating of the Lord of the Rings films. They're huge. Look at the critic ratings of Spider-Man films. They're huge. Look at the critic ratings of all these genre films, of Avatar, or whatever else you want to talk about. Those ratings are huge, huge critic ratings. So usually the critics are there too. I have no idea why with Man of Steel, so many film critics, many of them very good friends of mine, I don't know if they were hopped up on Walter White's blue meth or what's going on for that film, because to me it's still my favorite film of the year.
Drinking that hate juice.
They're pretty harsh on it, especially considering Superman Returns, I think, was certified fresh. It was like maybe like low 70s or something like that.
And then they just kept dropping. It was like 90s in the early thing.
Well, what happened with Superman Returns is everybody fell asleep. And then they like, woke up and said, oh, I think I liked it. Yeah. It was like...
And don't forget to subscribe to AMC Movie News on YouTube. It's free and a great way to stay updated with all the latest movie news and check out our daily show, AMC Movie Talk. Also, don't forget to check us out on Facebook and Twitter to stay in the loop for our special prizes, giveaways, and contests.